Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Frame by Frame podcast, your ultimate podcast for all things UX and UI. You're with Zach Oleski, Will Carson, and Cross Preston. That's me, folks. Now, today, this week's episode is going to be centered around the recent layoffs, the recent negativity, and a general overview of the tech and design industries on a broader scale in terms of not just UX and UI, but product design. And also, we're going to be mentioning video gaming because there is a lot of design in the video game world. Now, first of all, before we get into the meat of this topic, perhaps some of you are already familiar with certain individuals, shall I say, posting certain things regarding these layoffs, these mass layoffs by the biggest companies in the world. We've got Google, Microsoft, we've had Amazon, now we've got a lot of gaming companies. And we here just want to say that this is nothing. This is no reflection of the people who have lost their jobs. We know that all of these people are very talented at what they do, whether they be game animators, whether they be UX designers, whether they be UI designers, whether they be software developers, programmers, the whole shebang. We know that it is nothing to do with those of you who have been laid off and the negativity caused by some people saying that certain that all these layoffs are necessary because the workers are below average or average, which is very, very wrong. And there is a big difference between getting fired and getting laid off. Getting fired is happens when you just don't perform. It happens. But getting laid off is not to do with you. It's generally a business related problem, maybe finances, maybe corporate greed. We don't know. But generally, it is not to do with being fired. They are not mutually exclusive. And this is something we're going to be talking about. And of course, before we get into it as well, we want to say if we can help anyone out who's lost their job, and perhaps we can get leads or perhaps we can keep an eye out, we will be more than happy to do that here at the Frame by Frame. So, Zach, I know. In fact, it was actually something you commented on a colleague of yours that I saw this. But I know you wanted to talk a bit about this. So, what did you want to comment on regarding the recent layoffs and certain individuals' attitudes and lack of empathy for the people who have got laid off?
Well, I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but I will say that one person in particular took it upon themselves to put on their shield and challenge the internet with a really, I would say, not
Insensitive,
so
maybe.
unique. Yeah, we'll go with insensitive point of view, and which is fine. Everybody can have your opinion, but if you want to have your opinion, you want to state it on a social media site, especially a professional social media site where
Yeah,
the people who are losing these jobs and the people who are struggling to find new jobs, etc., etc. Yeah, that's probably not the place to do it unless you expect that backlash, and then you can't
yeah,
fight every single person that comes on there, and then basically like you're the third grade tattletale, like, oh look, you slung mud here recruiter, like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like,
yeah. I saw some of this individual's responses, and I thought, yeah, you're not really arguing with logic there. You're just sort of you're attacking the person who's critiquing your post. That pretty much shows that you're not able to professionally, maturely, and logically address these justifiable criticisms, right?
absolutely, like, I don't know, you can have your opinion and you can stick up for your opinion, but you can't attack everybody, and at the same time, like, why feel so threatened? Like, it's your opinion, why feel so threatened about it?
Yeah. And the thing is, the opinion isn't even informed. I mean, this individual, I checked out their jacket to use your Americanisms, as they say in the movies, and I'm thinking, what's special about you? Have you done anything for UX design? Have you written any books? Have you uh, came up with any new concepts, methodologies? No. So who are you? You seem to be very
Yeah, and
much below average.
I didn't understand the purpose of it. Like, okay, maybe yeah, somebody else had commented like, why isn't this on a Reddit, thread?
Yeah.
Like, why is this
Absolutely.
here? And
Maybe the individual is a professional troll. Who knows?
yeah, he's moving to LinkedIn because his profile is good enough for trolling. Why not?
Yeah.
No, it's yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan. On the brighter side of things, there was a lot of people supporting their community as you should. And
Yeah,
if you
that
want to
was the only
take,
good thing that came out of
yeah,
it.
like it showed the support for other designers and creatives in the field and industry, and it's good to see. But at the same time, I can, yeah, it's one thing to take the side of the corporation. That's fine. You can do that. You can side with business. That's okay. I totally understand why greed wins sometimes. Like that's fine. If you want to cut everybody, you think your products are where they're going to be and you're overestimating the capabilities of AI, take it. Go with it, run with it. Because you're probably going to end up hiring those same people back at double the salary later when you're failing or something
Yeah.
terrible is happening.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. And, or maybe they get them at half the price because everybody's desperate. But at some point, there's a break. Like you can only make so many people jobless and homeless for so long until
Yeah.
you're bankrupt on selling. Like there's nothing else you can sell.
Yeah. Well, I think actually we've seen this for a little while because I don't know if you've noticed, Zach or Will, but what I've noticed is, and I mentioned this to you, Zach, actually before, is I'm seeing more and more open positions, and I quote open um, positions for senior UX designers. It seems to be more and more, and I'm thinking, well, okay, like you just said, maybe it's corporate greed. Sometimes it works, although I generally, in my personal humble opinion, greed is never a good thing. I think you can still make a good profit without sacrificing people's livelihoods who are contributing to those profits. Maybe that's just me. But there's more and more frequency I'm seeing senior UX designers needed. And yet this is the problem because there's this greed wanting senior UX designers in junior design roles and with the accompanying pay. Now there is a lack of officially senior designers. And of course, it means that there's going to be a shift again. So I think what you say is actually quite predictive of what's going to happen with these layoffs. That perhaps after a reorganization of finances and stuff, it'll be, maybe some corporate nimrods will think, oh, you know what? We actually need to get these people back. But then if smaller companies or startups are actually taking these people on board, sure, the salaries might not be quite as high, but if the job stability is there, then why would the people who get laid off want to go back to the companies that laid them off instead of staying with companies that take them on and acknowledge their talents?
See, that's the other problem is I know there's a couple designers let go by Activision recently, and man, if I could get a job at Activision, like I'd be stoked. You know what I mean? Like
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
I would that would be on my like a bucket list item. You know what I mean? Like work at a company that I've
yeah.
enjoyed the product
I
of for so
almost
many years.
I almost managed to
Um,
get a job at Rare, actually, the ones who produced GoldenEye and Conker's Bad Fur Day. That I'd have been
Oh,
stoked
nice.
for that as well. Yeah, but
that's a
I lost.
classic video game, by the way. Conker's Bad Fur Day was like
Oh,
the end of my childhood.
yeah, it was the best. Oh, but the thing is, I lost out in the interview to someone who worked at Game Breakers. So go figure. I was only 18 as well, so yeah. Sorry, I didn't. I was digressing. Sorry, Zach. I didn't mean to.
Oh, it's fine. But yeah, some of the people that worked at Activision, like that was their. I mean, it is a dream. There's always coming back from that. You can work somewhere else, but especially if they really enjoyed the people they worked with or their job in general at that point, like that's
Mm,
a huge cut. You know what I mean? And you might still take a job with them because of your experience there, but who's to say that's not going to change when you come back? That's the risk you take. You're rolling the dice. But I can totally understand the mentality. Like I know if I were laid off from somewhere and I enjoyed that place so much, if I got another offer from them, I would think twice before taking it. But I mean, come on, you're probably going to take it if your heart was there.
Yeah, but then having said that, though, if your heart was there, but their heart wasn't, I mean, if it's the same people, would it not make you skeptical about the same thing happening, 3 months, 6 months, or a year down the line?
Oh, absolutely, and that's where I think you got to go with your senses on that. Like, don't go with your heart, go with your gut, or at least you use a little common sense the next time. Like, okay, they're making me an offer.
Yeah,
This is what happened last time. Take it into account and just make your
sometimes the head
decision. But
has to overrule the heart, I think.
yeah,
Sometimes,
um,
not all the time,
one
but sometimes.
one company I would actually really enjoy working for is Nintendo. Obviously, I had a Nintendo in 1986, so
I had
That'd
a
be
it's
I
fun.
had a Nintendo. I had a
man,
NES.
Mario, man, we would have little parties with the neighborhood kids. Oh, and then Yoshi made it on the scene, and it was like game
Yeah,
over. And then they
Super
did the
Mario
Mario
World.
Tetris. Whoa. And then what was that?
Yeah,
Wario Tetris was out for a while. Um,
that was afterwards. Yeah, when they introduced Wario and Waluigi. Just as a quick bit of trivia, for our listeners, I was in a pub quiz the other week down in Dortmund, and there was a question about what is the oldest gaming company, and it was actually Nintendo. They were from, I think, 1890 or something. They were doing games like board games and stuff,
Hmm. And I
and it's
think
actually the
they were
oldest gaming
originally
company.
like a toys company before
Yeah,
electronics came on.
yeah, they're the oldest gaming company.
and then they put out Duck Hunt / Mario cartridge game, and it was over.
Yeah, mind you, I
Um,
must admit, even though I had a NES and the SNES and I loved them dearly, and I did play the N64, I must admit I was always a Sony man. I was always for me the PSX best console ever. But anyway, again, I'm sorry, I'm going
but
off on a
yeah, I don't.
tangent here.
I yeah, I prefer Sony as well, but I still own a Switch. Like I love Nintendo, especially because of Zelda. But no, I don't know if you guys saw, but yeah, Mr. CEO of Nintendo made a public statement that they are not going to follow the lead on this
I did
mass
see
layoff
something like
trend.
that. I
And
did see
yeah,
something like that.
he basically stood up for his employees, and they all took a cut, and their employees get their paychecks. Like that's the way it should be,
That's awesome.
especially when your
Yeah,
company's making
I
money.
think
Like
I think that's a sign of a good company that has heart because if your employees are willing to take the pay cut but still have enough, for their day-to-day lives, then that shows that they really enjoy working there, which I think is the most important thing in a in a working environment. You have to enjoy the job no matter how much money it pays or how little money it pays.
yeah, this whole industry avalanche is making me a little not nervous, but it's like okay,
Apprehensive
I don't
about
know
the
that.
future of
Yeah,
it.
like I don't know the inside and out of what these companies are going through, but from what I have read and what I can see on paper, it doesn't look that bad. So I don't really understand the move here. And so that's where
Hmm.
my thinking instantly goes to greed. Like, record profits. Okay, cut all the workers and then try to get them back at half the price later when we need them.
Yeah, and again, it,
Hmm.
it could be some of these workers, and I'm sure they will get hired by maybe lesser gaming companies or any companies that are, startups or smaller, because they'll think, well, they've got the experience of these big companies. They'll be very valuable. They can bring a lot to the table, more than just their skills. They'll be bringing experience
Exactly.
how
Yeah.
of companies who have made it obviously further in the industry just because of longevity or a
Well,
reputation.
I think that's where you're going to see the future of UX product and UI design as a whole. Like that whole bubble is no longer going to be so split
It's
up.
definitely
I think
burst.
companies are going to try to merge all those roles somehow as best as they can for less pay, um,
Yeah, yeah,
which is fine.
definitely.
It's just
Well, they advertise as UX and UI designer. I've seen them. We've all seen the adverts, all UX and UI. And it's like, well,
yeah,
they overlap, but there are still different disciplines. Otherwise, boot camps would offer UX and UI in one.
yeah. It's I don't know. I think it's going to get funny because they're also using like generic job postings that are constantly
Yeah,
open, but they're not actually hiring for. They just want the numbers for how
yeah. As I
sought
call it,
after their
vanity
company is.
KPIs.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the larger companies are using the ATS, and I think that's going to bite them in the butt because there's a lot of designers who are way, way too talented for some of those jobs, but they're
Yeah.
perfect for that job. And
Especially when they get rejected for junior positions. I mean, junior entry level, you don't need experience. You just need the tools. You need the knowledge. You learn.
Yeah, there was a senior product designer. He wrote an article the other day, and he was like, "Man, I've applied to over 1,200 jobs, and in the last one, I fit the criteria like tenfold. Sent in my application, and within 5 minutes, had a rejection letter." And he's like, I don't understand. Like, you would think ideal candidate, perfect, and these people are losing out.
Yeah.
So who the hell are these companies hiring? Like, that's what I don't understand. So at some point, I think maybe
the CEO's
all these algorithms, yeah, whatever,
yeah,
however
or
they're
friends,
doing it,
or friends of the family, or friends of the CEO. But
yeah,
sometimes,
I'm sure there's a lot of
sometimes
like
these positions
inside.
are already given internally. Though it's quite often it's the case. I mean, I can't list the names, but I've let's just say I've seen firsthand of jobs being advertised externally, but they've already been given internally. It's just
Well,
because to seem
I
open.
think all this is going to stir up the next big entrepreneurial wave of designers. Like, these are the guys who have the ideas, and they're going to figure out how to make it work somehow. And you're going to see smaller companies, like take Figma, for example. They're going to pop up. Nobody's going to pay attention. And then 5 years from now, we'll be working with a brand new software that took Figma out from under, like they just came up out of nowhere.
Pulled the rug from under their feet. Yeah.
And,
I would like to try to backstep just one or two little topics here, because there is a potential for a lot of frustration. Like we mentioned about a minute ago, like we're all pretty sure that these UX jobs are going to become like, hey, I want you to handle the research and the UI and the AI part of it. I want you to do everything, but then also not pay for all of these job functions in the same role.
Yeah.
Of course, this is going to be frustrating in the moment. But when you think about every technology increase over human history, like we have never experienced like pay increases in accordance with additional responsibilities. Like at the creation of the wheel, you think people were paid like 12 times more because they were able to do things 100 times faster? Probably not. Like it became expected very quickly that everyone can use the wheel. And like that is what happens with every new technology or every new advancement in every industry. So in the moment, it might sting that we will be expected to handle research and UI and everything else. But that really only comes along if our technology allows us to handle everything. And it really is getting there. And like, sure, we won't get double the pay or anything, but probably no one's going to get double the pay of this, except for like a few people here and there. But that's the way it's been with all tech increases across all of humanity. Otherwise, we'd all be trillionaires by now.
Yeah, and I'm fine with the pay scale balancing out. Like it did get a little extreme. Some of the job postings and the offered salary I saw was like, really? Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. But yeah, the more recent job post salaries, when they do post it, because I noticed that's changing too a lot, don't even care to post anymore how much they're willing to pay.
I think in Germany, actually, here in Germany, there's a potential law where every company advertising has to advertise. They have to, when they're advertising, they have to mention the salary on offer. I don't think they have to give a specific salary, but they have to, I think they will
Like a
have
pay
to give
range.
a general thing, a range between, so much under the median wage for that role and a little above. But I read something about that where it's going to happen. They have to mention the salary.
That's actually a law in Colorado too, and that's why I am.
Oh, really?
That's why I don't qualify for so many remote positions, because the companies that don't want to post that stuff, like they can just get around it by saying, like, "All right, we are not hiring Colorado because we refuse to do it." So that's why I am disqualified from so many remote positions, which is wild.
Okay, I'll stop tagging you in the remote positions unless they're in Colorado. Well,
That's funny. Thank you.
No, only
but
tag him
sometimes
in the
speaking of
remote.
tagging, but sometimes, well, that time when I tagged you about that article about the city, I kind of did it. I just feel like tagging Will in. I don't know what he knows about this, but he'll say something. I just think, yeah, I'm just going to tag Will on a random article.
I love it. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to amuse myself that day. I have a very boring nightlife, so I have to do something for amusement.
I got a huge list of books I can give you.
As long as they're in digital format, I can't remember the last time I actually opened the book and read the whole thing, unless it was on a screen. I know that makes me a bit of a philistine in that sense, but I don't
No,
know.
there's just something about a
It's just so much
physical
easier.
book. Something about a physical book. I can't get over it. Like my brand new books, I love when I get about halfway through and you just crack the spine. You just hear that book pop, and it's like, all right, now it'll flex
Yeah.
a little better next time.
Someone I worked with actually years ago, and actually I stayed with it with this person for about 3 weeks to 4 weeks because I had to move out of one of my flats, and he was saying the same thing. He was asking me, "Why do you always read on your phone or your laptop?" I said, "Just because it's ease of use." And he actually in his bathroom he actually had a chair in the middle of the bathroom where he could read. But that's probably taking it a little to the extreme, actually. I don't know. But yeah, no, books. Don't get me wrong. I can read books, obviously, but it's just easier to get the information from a screen. But having said that, maybe when I'm older and I've shifted away from technology, maybe I'll just in a typical English uh, garden, I'll read a book or something.
If they still exist, then maybe print will just totally die at some point.
Well, yeah, it could well do. I mean, now everything's all about convenience, really. It's, what's the quickest way of doing something? That's also the other thing. But yeah, it could well be. I mean, we're seeing everything become digital now anyway, and who's to say that books will still be around? Well, they will be in libraries, obviously, but I think that given how everything is really shifting at such a pace that people can't keep up. I mean, whether it be books or whether it be design or gaming roles or anything like that, it seems to be that it is all about the money now. It's not just about making profits to be able to keep a business going and keep people employed, but it seems to be really just about minimizing costs and maximizing profits, regardless of the cost to other people.
Absolutely. Like even these gaming companies, I saw Ubisoft when they laid off a bunch of people. I was a little irritated because I do play a game that they make that has reoccurring bugs that have been there and they don't even comment on it when you throw it in their threads. They
Mm,
don't even care. And it's been that way for almost 5 years now. In the game, they finally announced they're going to start developing a new one, and yet they just lay off a bunch of designers and programmers. Like,
yeah,
I guess I'm
I
not
must
playing the new
admit,
one.
I've not really played any Ubisoft games since Rayman, the original, which was to me, which I will say is one of the best games of all time for me. But yeah, I've heard that about a couple of game companies where they don't, especially with microtransactions, where they don't really care about bugs. I mean, there's a game I play. I don't really want to list it by name, but they're releasing a new stuff, and yet I'm still suffering with the bugs from the older packs. And I'm thinking, why are you not working on on the older packs before releasing the new ones? And then I just think, well, it's more about money, just getting a product out there. The diehard fans will buy it without question. Other people will follow because they want to upload stuff online or do Twitch. Yeah, I think it's just really about money now and profit. Sadly.
It's that settling for mediocrity. I think that's got a lot of companies going right now. Is the more content we put out and the more we can charge for a subscription for the newest content regularly, um, the better.
Yeah, that I think that is exactly the mentality. I mean, it's always happened. I remember there was a game in the 2000s. Companies did it before, although I would say on a far more, um, I don't want to say ethical, although I would say it is ethical, but on a better scale in terms of expansion packs. You know, the odd time, maybe like Age of Empires or even on the PS2. Like, for example, there was a series called Dynasty Warriors 3, and Koei or Koei, depending on who you ask, released the odd expansion packs, such as Dynasty Warriors 3 Extreme Legends. But it was worth the money because it wasn't as much as the main game, but it was worth the money in terms of all of the extra content, characters, and everything else. So it's always gone there. But I always felt that any expansion packs in the past were worth the money. They were actually needed, especially considering back then you didn't have enough RAM or room for all this content. You had to do it in split discs, like Final Fantasy, for example. That was done on different discs.
Yeah, absolutely. The maybe it's because I'm an old school gamer and I was around when the expansion thing started, like really started catching.
Hmm.
And now when I see expansion, my brain tells me what I remember, but my knowledge of now tells me I'm an idiot if I buy that because I'm not getting any real value
Yeah,
from this minor upgrade.
yeah. I used to be so into buying for any game I was really passionate about. I mean, I've played hundreds of games over the last, I don't know, maybe totaling over 1,000, maybe it's over the last 30, well, up until I was maybe, yeah, 30 years or so. Uh, and I was always keen to get them, but I wouldn't rush out to buy uh, any updated packs or expansion packs because I know they're going to be full of bugs. I just wouldn't buy anything that's just released. I would always hold off seeing if what the reception is to an expansion pack, for example, because I don't want to buy something where I have bugs, and if it's a expansion to the main game, quite often these bugs affect features in the main game, which obviously makes the gaming experience or the user experience, to be more accurate, worse.
Yeah, a lot of the newer like updates, especially with this Ubisoft game that I play, I play it with people that I grew up with back in the States, so it's like that's my one day a week that I actually will do something other than art or design related or
Or
any other thing.
marathon
I
running.
Yeah, exactly. Like today, didn't do my run in the morning. I did it actually like right before dinner. But yeah, no. So Saturdays I usually am playing games. Anyway, this Ubisoft game, they've had God knows how many updates and bug fixes and patches, but they still haven't fixed like major issues. Like one, there's this NFT you can't really or not NFT. Yeah, sorry, my brain's scrambled. You have a computer you can talk to, and she's supposed to give you a mission, or you're supposed to be able to turn one in, and she's just not there ever, and nothing's the way it's supposed to be in this area.
Hmm.
And if that
So,
happens to you, you can no longer progress in the game like any other player that didn't have that bug. So, for example, there's a blueprint that you can get to get special skill points you need later, and
mm,
if you missed this or you get that bug, there's no way to get this blueprint to get what you need to keep leveling up quickly.
that reminds me of a bug. I remember. I don't know if you remember this, world, but you might have been around for this, Zach. Do you remember the original Digimon World that was released on PlayStation?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the American version. There was a bug where you got to a certain part of the game, and I'm so glad I grew up with PAL. I had my criticisms of some of the PAL versions of games, but this was one where I was more than thrilled to have the PAL version. And it was where you got to a certain point, but that was it. You couldn't actually progress. So pretty much you paid full price for a game, but you could only play up until 20%. You could only get up to 20% of the way through,
They
and then
sold you
that
the
was it.
trial version.
Yeah, yeah, just the full price trial version. Yeah, you could say. But do we think? I mean, given this stimulated discussion about the games and the industry and the expansion packs. Do we think that there is a correlation between prioritizing profit in with releasing so many expansion packs and DLCs and everything, and cutting out people because you want to invest more in making more money? Yeah, to me, it seems counterproductive because if you lay off people, you're not going to have the workforce to be able to produce uh, expansion packs or DLCs and get them out in time. But if you rush them with the skeleton crew that you probably have, you it's just going to be full of bugs. So I don't
Yeah, but
think
maybe a lot
anyone
of these
wins.
companies, maybe a lot of tech companies in general, found that a mediocre product is okay.
Is
And when
enough.
something happens, yeah, it's enough to release it
Yeah,
and to let
as
it
long as
out
it does
there.
its job.
Yeah, and you know what? They found that users will probably put up with it if it's the better option or the only option as far as games are concerned. If you like a franchise, it's probably with one specific company, and you're gonna have to buy it from them if you want to keep playing it. And
And then
Yeah,
also, when it comes to just like expansions, like I'm sure it's easier to put out an expansion than it is to put out a whole new game, because you already have the engine built for your game and everything. You already have your content schedule, or at least you have a sample of what your content schedule would be. But then also, if we think about it in just pure business terms, it is far easier to just retain. It's far easier to make money using existing customers than it is to acquire new ones. And with expansions, you're pretty much just catering to your current customers. Whereas, like with the new game, you have to worry about everybody liking it. Whereas with the expansions, you already know that your current player base likes the game, so they're more likely to buy the expansions.
yeah.
So I wonder if that's part of it.
it's
I
definitely
I think
got
it
to be in
is.
their
It
strategy,
has to
but
be. Yeah. Well, the thing is, we've got companies now. Whether if you buy software, pretty much most people are going to buy from a particular company. If someone's going to buy hardware, again, there's a particular company that people will buy just because everyone knows of it. Even if you're not in the field, you're not in the industry, you're just a casual consumer. You pretty much know that. I guess that people think something, as long as something is dependable, even if it's got bugs or it's flawed, it's just more convenience, I think, whether it actually is convenient or not.
yeah, it goes back to that we've always done it this way. Like at some point, the last Battlefield that was released, if we're going to stick with game talk for a minute, the last Battlefield that was released, I did not buy. I refused to buy it. It came out way too soon after the previous game, and that's usually where games start to go downhill. Like Call of Duty, I used to be a
Mm,
fan, and then it was like every
I did
6
as well.
months they
I
had a
used to be
new
a
one
fan of that.
coming out, and I don't
Yeah,
need
it
to.
got
I,
ridiculous.
yeah, I don't need to shell out 70, $80 for a game every 6 months. Like, come on, man. Like, you could have done seasons like Battlefield does seasons. This other Tom Clancy
Or
game I
Fortnite
play,
does seasons.
they, yeah, so like it's their way of doing the expansion. Like, okay, it's a new season. Here's some new quests. Here's some new things available. They can reuse content that they have in the game. They can reuse, characters. They don't have to completely build a whole new game. They can add new sections of a map. It makes sense. They don't need as many people, but at the same time, I'm not playing Battlefield anymore. Like I haven't picked up that game in so long, and it's because the newest
Same.
one they released ruined it for me. Like I wasn't buying it; it wasn't worth purchasing, and the people that did purchase it ended up going back, and I was watching those waiting rooms just fill up. And it's like, oh, so everybody gave up on the new game, and they're coming back to the previous version, and now it's just emptying because people are bored.
Yeah,
So
that
they're going to
happens.
look for something else. And so I think companies have to think about that too. Like, yeah, it might be easier to keep your same customers and just give them new features or new content, but at the same time there is a reason for, you know, doing that big
Yeah. Well, I
redo of
think
a game or
the majority, I think, would do that, Zach. I mean, I used to really like my favorite Call of Duty was Black Ops. I used to love that one, but eventually it got to the point where, like I'd be in a waiting room, and you'd be lucky if you got three more people to join because people were playing the more modern installments. Yeah. Do we think? In fact, I'm glad we brought this up because I think we can actually connect the dots here. Is Do we think that quality has generally gone downhill? I mean, for example, startups. When we were mentioning about the layoffs and about how startups will probably be the ones, or smaller companies will probably be the ones who will have the foresight to hire these people with experience in these big companies, and along with having experience in their uh, give any given discipline or field. Do we think that it's always the case that the bigger a company gets, yes, of course, when a company gets bigger, they hire people, but do we think it's like the empires in history where eventually they will crumble and the quality will just go downhill? For example, I always say it, I think the Fender bass guitars of today are nowhere near as good as the Fender bass guitars were in the 60s and 70s. Do we think that every time a company expands and grows, that the quality isn't there because they've already sold their brand and people know it? As
I mean,
in, they
That's
don't have to
you're a
try.
you're a computer guy. Look at computer companies. How many computer companies have rose and do you does Gateway Computer still even exist?
No, Gateway doesn't. Compaq was one that doesn't. That was my first own. That was actually the first computer I ever owned by myself. I mean, I'd been using computers before. Was Compaq, but they went bust or overtaken.
And Dell's still huge, but they were bigger. Like everybody
Yeah,
knows Dell, but they're not like I
there's
don't
Intel.
regularly, yeah, like I don't regularly think of Dell when I think of computers. I think of Acer as one. I think of Mac obviously, but as far as PC, like I know Alienware for gaming, but those are the computers I know. I never once am like, oh yeah, he plays on a Dell.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
it's
there's
interesting.
hundreds of them that have come and gone. Hundreds of them.
I like that you mentioned that hundreds have come and gone because that's probably the case for every industry ever. Now, in the
Yeah, of
conversation of like,
course.
has quality gone up or has quality gone down? I think that depends on the window of time you're looking at. Because I think this is very similar to the stock market. Like, if you follow just one stock, like it might fizzle and die. But if you look at the whole thing, if you're in the US and you know what the S&P 500 is, like the stock market has only gone up since its inception. Like on average, the S&P 500, which again those are the 500 biggest stocks basically in the US, that has an average return rate of 10% over a long period of time. But if you look at it on any one day, it might go down. Like I think it's the same thing with our technology and its quality throughout human history.
It's
Like
down at the minute,
we
actually.
might think I'm glad you checked. Thank you. Um, but like sometimes our games
I'm
might feel
interested
like,
in
oh, we had a
stocks,
bad game
so
year.
yeah.
Mhm. Like we're having a big games as a service moment, or we've been having this for the last 5+ years. And some people love it, some people hate it. For me, I don't really care for it, so I perceive this to be a lower quality of game. But I think over time, like 10 years from now, we're going to see what like games as a service did for gaming as an industry, and it's probably going to be massively positive. Like if you look at any movie, even a garbage movie from today, it's probably going to look like a piece of art to people who lived 30 years ago. Like same with gaming,
Well, yeah.
same with design products.
Compared
So
to
like
like 70s and 80s B movies, yes, the terrible
yeah,
movies
exactly.
today still look good.
But I think,
So
but with
like I
this though,
think
it's
as
funny
a
you
whole,
it's
our quality is going up
sorry, well, I just wanted to
astronomically.
say,
Mhm.
mm, and I can see where you're coming from on that, but I think that actually maybe this quality, very often there's always a short wave of demand for the things that were old or retro. You know how retro some occasionally comes back in. I
Absolutely,
mean,
yeah.
check like Sony, they released a mini PSX loaded with games. Of course, it's not like the original PSX, but
Mhm.
it was actually pretty popular with people who weren't even around when the PSX was out. So it's like, oh, that's retro, that's cool. But actually, I think that perhaps initially the quality might seem higher, but again, I always bring up music because it's one thing I understand quite well. Is I just think that even though the quality might be better. We have AI that can do chord progressions for you. We have software that can compose for you. I think that actually it's not the fact that it's not coming from a human. It's not something that's having to do trial and error. It just produces it. I think that the quality is hollow in the sense of no one can really take credit for it because no person is actually doing it anymore. In other words, everything is becoming more and more automated rather than being done manually.
I mean, I'll agree with you from the standpoint of design systems. Like, the reason some of us enjoy building them is because we know it's its own product for companies to
Yeah,
reuse to make their life easier. But at the
yeah,
same time, there's only so many ways you can do things. Of course, you can have 10 billion different design systems out there. They all have their purpose. But at some point, like, it stops. Everything will start to look the same. I mean, if you look at like Flutter and all these other apps, they all use Material 3 design system. Apple, Mac,
I use it too.
the entire brand for Mac uses the flat design. Like, it's at some point it all settles somewhere and it's all going to look the same. If you look on the internet, everybody uses one or the other design style. And so
yeah.
I think
It is. I call it
we're
generic. A lot of things are generic because that's the thing now. That's the requirement. It's not a case of having something that's had a lot of thought into it. It's just something that does the job. It's just saving time because time equals money, right?
yeah, but I mean, at some point I wondered this the other day. I'm like, okay, so if all these designers out here are like me and we're all doing research and documenting this research, it's there for a reason. We know it works and doesn't work. So when comes the point that companies get so lazy, they just bank on outdated design systems and fire
Mm,
designers? They're like, well, we have this design system, we use this UI kit, and we're not going to change it. We just need one guy to push the pixels when we want something to look different, and one guy to throw that in the computer code to develop it,
yeah,
and we'll call it a day.
yeah.
It's a
It's sort of
it,
it's sort of the easy way out, really. I've noticed this even just to get back to games. I was playing one of the Yu-Gi-Oh games. It was free, and I wouldn't pay any money towards it. I'm very much a man who likes to have. I like things that are unique. So if I'm playing a game, for example, it's a good example to use. I don't like the idea of there being just one strategy that everyone adopts. Like in this card game, there was a deck that people use. There was like two or three decks, and pretty much you may as well surrender straight away. I really don't like that. I really prefer things that are unique, where there's differences. You know, where there's strengths and weaknesses. I'm not really a big fan of just having everything as strong because I think that it becomes boring and there's no scope for creativity. And I think that creativity eventually gets lost because it ends up being a system and a system that everyone or companies adopt. So I think actually the uniqueness of things is being lost. And I think it actually goes against the whole idea of creativity. In my opinion, of course, it's just my humble opinion, but
it's
that's how
such
I
an
feel about a lot of things.
it's such an interesting like thought experiment to do because when you're thinking about entertainment, like absolutely we want variety, we want as many options as possible. We want to find something that we can sort of apply to our own personal brand so that other people pass us on the street like, oh, you like Yu-Gi-Oh, I like Yu-Gi-Oh. But then when it comes to things that are purely like utility based, like I don't want to be challenged. If I'm like searching for a new tool, I don't know why I would ever go away from Figma, but if I'm searching for a new tool, absolutely I do not want to find something that is opposite of Figma. I want something as close to Figma as possible so that I can get down and actually start using it ASAP. And if I start thinking about like products or software that are used by anyone in a fast-paced environment, like I work part-time at the nearby restaurant and I use Toast. And Toast is rolling out an update and it's going live for everybody on January 30th. Like there was like a 3 or 4 month period where you could try it out, but it's going live in a couple of days. We're recording on January 28th, and I dread this update because I know the version of the product I know, and I do not want to switch. I imagine it's the same thing for medical professionals. Like if they have a product that works for them, like if they go to another hospital, there's no way they want something that's different unless there were some major flaws in their previous software. But like if they have a software that works, you just want to stay with that software like forever. So it's such an interesting paradox that like we're designers, we want to try out new stuff. Enjoy my voice crack, everybody. We want to try out new stuff and styles, but then also like we don't want to challenge our users to learn new ways of doing things. So like if everyone's used to Google Material Design 3, like of course me as a product designer, I'm going to like take bits and pieces from Material Design 3 because I want my users to be able to use the site with zero questions and with all the comfort in the world. And so that's such an interesting idea that like we want to be creative, but for our business goals and for our user goals, we do not want to be creative because we want to provide as smooth an experience as possible.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
found a lot of
there's a way
times
to get the balance between that. Sorry, Zach. Go on.
I find a lot of times that even though we are using these systems, the user will surprise the hell out of you, firstly. And usually it's based off of what actions they're performing or what they're using this tool for that you're designing. And that's where you'll never run out of the need for research because, there's, let's take productivity apps, for example. Like there's a million of them out there. Some function great for everything. But at the same time, I'm not going to use the same style productivity app if I'm doing like big deals and sales, or maybe marketing would be totally different than what I need for design. I'm not going to run, a Kanban board the same way for every project I'm on. So that's where the research still needs to happen. But I think we all stick to the similar patterns because that's what we need if it's a work utility. But I think like games or, stuff that's not income generating based. So like shopping apps, they all function the same and they all start to look the same because that's a funnel that works and it gets exactly what the company needs, which is, they need the money coming in and the purchases made. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think it has to be either or. I think that there should be a balance. I mean, of course, something like the medical industry, where it is really a matter of life and death. Of course, you want to have you as the doctor, as the patient, you would both want to have the most secure, safe method of or the way of operating. But I think that when it comes to apps, I mean, for me personally. I mean, professionally, I will always work according to what the company wants in the product. I may give my ideas, but ultimately it's about designing for the product. But for me as a user, any app that I may use, I want to have it where it doesn't look the same as any other app. I want to know that a company's advertising its brand, not with aggressive advertising and marketing, but just with something subtle. So perhaps, I mean, let's talk about iconography. I think it's widely accepted that the settings icon is that standard cog. We've got the hamburger menu. Sure, there are apps that might have the top and bottom line shorter to make it look more like a honeycomb. But as a user, I would like to see more creativity in terms of the app. So something that I think, oh, that is definitely this company, this is definitely that company, without obviously sacrificing the practicality. I mean, for sure, settings I associate with a cog, but it doesn't mean it has to be the same cog. You could have a cog that has a drop shadow effect, or it could have a chromatic effect, just something that adds a little uniqueness to it. But then, of course, designing apps, the more the more unique you try and make an app, the more time it takes. Of course, there are project deadlines, project budgets, and what have you. But I think that there could be the balance there. I think there is one out there, a balance, but I just don't think it's been found or it's been looked into. because of all the rushing around. Well, the whole world is in a rush. 24 hours is not always enough for people.
Yeah, I think that's where
Mhm.
design itself is changing too. Like everything's. I think that's the biggest problem at the moment is everything's kind of in a weird spiral. Like you have AI coming up, the industry itself is up in the air. You have games industry that's become kind of stagnant, if I may say
Mm.
so myself. This is my only my opinion, but I don't think games have introduced anything new in a long time. Like there's not been a single
No.
game I'm excited about. Like everybody raved when they announced the new Grand Theft Auto. Great. I've been playing it since the old computer version where you couldn't
The
really tell if
original
it was a
GTA,
car.
yeah.
Yeah, like it was rectangles driving around with a little circle as your head.
And a bird's eye view.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Still fun.
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely it's great. I remember playing all of them. So yeah, it's nice to
Yeah,
hear there's a
same.
new one, but I wasn't excited about it because like I wondered to myself how over the top is this new one going to be. The other one had a great storyline. I'll still check it out, but it wasn't like, oh, groundbreaking game of the year. Like, no, give me
Yeah.
something really out there. Like, give me something cool.
We
But
had
again,
Baldur's
that's
Gate 3.
entertainment.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, just because since we're just on the subject of gaming, I mean, we'll be wrapping up anyway shortly. But I must admit, I feel the same way, Zach. I've not really come across up until I played Resident Evil Village. Now, maybe because the last Resident Evil I played was the original Resident Evil 3. I might have had a play at Resident Evil Code Veronica X, but Resident Evil 3 was the last game I played in that series. And of course, I bought Resident Evil Village last year. And I must admit, it really took me back to being a game that solidified what made games great in the 90s. Sure, it has amazing graphics, but I actually think it had something that a lot of games, in my humble opinion, lack, which is great storytelling, a great storyline. And for me, it's like a pizza. The storyline is the equivalent of the sauce. It doesn't matter how good the toppings are, it doesn't matter how good the base is. If the sauce isn't right, i.e., the storyline isn't there, it just doesn't excite me, you know?
I mean, I totally understand. The last game I really like freaked out about the storyline is a game called Detroit. I don't know if you
Become
guys.
I
Human.
don't know.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh my god, that's such a great game. I love games like Heavy Rain and what was that? Beyond Two Souls. That was a great game
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last one that really got me was this Detroit Become Human. Like I think I replayed that 4 times because you end up with a different ending usually if you play it differently.
Right.
But the
So-
storyline was
so-
so good.
So, do we think then that regarding bringing this back to the layoffs, because obviously all of this is important in the gaming industry, do we think that? I mean, I'm just going to throw this question out there because I'm sure it's going to be on a few people's minds. Is it that these layoffs, are companies doing it because, or rather, I should ask, are companies focusing on the profits because they don't really have the time to trust the people they've hired, who they've let go, to actually make really great games? Do we think that the profits itself has actually killed any scope for that creativity in making video games, for example?
Well, they turned it into a machine, so now it's made to print money. Why do the unexpected when what we're doing is working until it's not working?
That's always the classic maxim, isn't it? Where, let's just keep doing something until not when it gets from great to good, but just when it gets really bad.
Yeah, like I don't want to sound pessimistic for design because I mean, as a creative and designer, I have high hopes for the industry and the future of the industry.
Yeah.
At the moment, I I don't have a good feeling. I can't say that's going to last forever, but to be honest, I don't know. Even for myself, like I work at a great company, we're not huge, but it still makes you think. Like every time I see another wave of layoffs, I'm like, man, like when
I
is
think it will still
the
get worse before it gets better, I think,
like
is
when is the
probably what.
slaughter going to be done, and when will all these companies realize like, well, the people who were loyal employees are not going to be loyal customers, and they probably can't be customers anyway after a year of looking for work if that's how the industry keeps going.
Yeah. Well, the other
So
thing is as well, Zach, is it's always the same. I mean, when I was in customer services for, well, many years, from when I was 18 to all the way to when I was nearly 29, 30, B2C, B2B. And if a customer has a bad experience, or in this case, if someone gets laid off, and they're obviously going to mention that negative experience. You know, you might, if say you're working for a gaming company, you enjoy it, you might really only mention it if someone asks, "Hey, how's your job going? How's your career?" Because it's something that you expect. And it's like with same with customer complaints. A customer will only complain. Very rarely will they have the enthusiasm or the energy to tell you you're doing a great job than telling you you're doing a rubbish job.
it's
And that's
easy
the
to
same every.
complain.
Yeah,
It's hard to
well,
compliment somebody instead of
yeah,
making
because you
fun of their
expect
shoes.
good. Yeah, well, you expect a good experience. You know, if you walk into a supermarket and you ask someone where a product is, you don't expect them to say, "Go look for it yourself." That's obviously something that is noticeable. Whereas if they say, "Oh, yeah, it's on aisle 5," or better yet, they even show you, then of course you may say thank you, but you're not going to tell people, "Hey, I had a good experience." But if you have a bad experience, you're going to tell people that. I think if you give a customer a good experience, I think the old way was you give a customer a good experience, they'll tell a couple of people. You give a customer a bad experience, and they'll tell about 9 or 10 people. And it's the same, whether it's people being laid off or people being rejected for jobs. It will leave a sour taste in the mouth, and of course, they're going to say, "Hey, you know what? They've made these really dumb decisions. They will just want to save money. I don't recommend working for them. I don't even recommend buying their products because the quality isn't there." I think it actually has more of a rippling effect than what companies, hiring managers, recruiters, or the decision makers, especially in the games industry, as we're seeing now, probably don't really realize that in the long term, it might be the long term, probably not the short term, but definitely in the long term,
Well,
their reputations will be hit.
the other side of my thinking is there's no way that this many big companies all had similar bad business decisions that are so terrible that they have to cut 30% of their workforce. Like, what, you crazy? Some of you are
Well,
posting record profits and you let go 60%, or is that how you got the record profits? Is you let go of all those people and now you can claim that?
well, yeah, maybe if they let people go, they have the money in the budget. They can say, "Oh, well, these are profits because we've actually made more money than." Even though you've not actually made more money, technically the numbers will show as a ratio. Yeah, we've got more money this year. But then maybe when we were talking about having one system, maybe we don't know the ins and outs. Maybe companies heard of other companies, especially the bigger ones, having their own way of doing things, and they adopt those systems to the point where they had the same problems. I don't think we can ever really put our fingers on that as being yes or no in terms of what's caused these mass layoffs. I mean, I know we're about to wrap up. Will, do you have anything? So I think you had a couple of things you also wanted to mention in relation to that, besides what you've already mentioned, right?
Um, we'll leave mentorship for another time, but it's hard for me because I have such an anti answer to layoffs. um, like, of course, I think about the reasons behind them because I'm on here and I talk with you guys about it. But in my own personal life and my own personal reactions, when I hear layoffs, my reaction is not like, "Oh, I wonder why." my reaction is like, all right, I'm just going to keep trying to be the absolute best designer I can be so that I'm never laid off. And I hope that other people try to do the same. Which, again, such an anti-answer because it, it's not really helpful for the community at large. It's more helpful on the individual level where, like, yeah, I'm still going to, like, it doesn't change the amount of work I have to put in to be the best designer I can be. Like, it doesn't really change anything on my part.
Absolutely not. And
just, yeah.
Absolutely not. Like that's the one thing I'll never discourage is continually trying to improve your skills.
Yeah.
But
it can't affect you negatively. But actually, you mentioned mentorship. Sometimes the best way, the best type of mentorship is actually where you're learning from someone in the industry in an actual live environment. I mean, the layoffs have not just affected people who are maybe juniors or have fewer years of experience than seniors. It's everyone across the board in all levels. So I think actually the mentorship would also change. Of course, this is something we will discuss in a future episode, but actually I think it does relate to it. I mean, if people are getting laid off, how can people who are trying to break in the industry learn from some of the best in the industry who are no longer in the industry?
I mean, they're in the industry. They're looking for work now, which also is.
But I mean, they're not
again
actually
mentally. It's
like
mentally
in a live
draining.
Environment now.
It's mentally draining, so they're going to have a hard time. I think some will have a hard time continuing mentorship because they're trying to pull themselves up at the same, and they probably at some point have some kind of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. And if I'm mentoring somebody and now I've lost my job, maybe I feel that I can't mentor
not credible.
You. Yeah, like
okay, like the credibility is undermined.
Yeah, like I'm out of work and I'm looking and there's nobody hiring me and I have too much time that I'm trying to save my house or my family or whatever it is that came down to the job loss thing. And then, it's probably a little bit of selfishness, but that's okay. It's really okay. So maybe they just don't feel they should be doing it at that point, or maybe they don't want to take the time and it's just too much for them to handle. I don't know what that's going to do to the mentorship
well, I think
industry.
Well, I think it'll change it. Not because I think it, like you said, it's people may feel not credible anymore. I mean, I've shared this with you guys before. It's like, we do a podcast and we do give a lot of valuable information. We get people telling us that they really enjoy our podcast and it's really helpful professionally and even personally with support groups. But sometimes I felt as in, well, if I'm getting rejected from all these roles, do I feel qualified to be a podcast host of an industry I'm trying to, I'm still trying to crack it? So not for the same reasons, but I do have some understanding of what they may go through when it comes to mentorship, because I think, well, if I'm unemployed, all it would take is someone to say, well, if you know your stuff, why are you unemployed?
Yeah,
I think and that question would probably be something that it would affect me, and just like it would affect anyone who's been laid off. If you said to someone who's been laid off, well, clearly you weren't good enough, or you didn't practice your skills enough, because otherwise, if you did, you would have been kept on. Of course, it's not like that. You can practice all the skills and become the best at everything, but like with the old saying, "Job for life," which doesn't exist. I think that it's always good to improve your skills. And just to wrap this up, I think that improving your skills, learning new skills, I don't think it means anymore that you will 100% be still in work. It just means you increase the chances of staying in work. It's not guaranteed,
right?
But it's just something that gives you more of a chance of staying in work, i.e. that you're not the one who's going to be laid off. I would say. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think we will. I think we're all in agreement that it's going to get worse before it gets better, and I think that it's definitely something we're all going to be keeping our eyes on.
Yeah, and I'm noticing smaller companies are having a lot more openings, which is that weird little bright light in this funky tunnel. But
Yeah. I mean, I would love to work for, a startup or a small company. I just, of course, again, it's not about the pay, but it's just about being on that journey, that there's a whole world of new possibilities. Whereas if you're in a company that's been established for a long time, you are in a tunnel because that's why it's the longevity, I think. That's why big companies have stayed in. But yeah, I think we've had a really, I think we've really had a good in-depth discussion about it. And for those of you out there who have been laid off, of course, you have all of our sympathies. And again, those of you that we know we're connected with on LinkedIn, we'll obviously try to, you know, give some links or some leads. But we really hope that you all find work soon. We hope that you all get hired. You obviously all deserve to be, because you are very talented. You're not below average, to quote this certain individual. But again, we hope that this episode in the podcast has been extremely useful. Perhaps it's given you some insights into what's happening in the industry now. Perhaps it's given you more awareness of what can happen in an industry, all these mass layoffs, and that you will all, like we do, you will all continuously better yourselves and learn new skills, especially with AI. That is something that I would personally recommend you learn about, all the new technologies with AI. But again, thank you very much for listening to us, for joining in. Again, we really hope that it's been informative for you. You can contact us at any time on LinkedIn. You can contact us at our email. I think it's the xframe.uxpod@gmail.com.
Mhm.
Of course, you can also contact us at our LinkedIn page, The Frame by Frame. We're steadily growing more and more followers. Please feel free to participate on there, post, message, anything you want. And again, thank you very much, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Good night.